This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. All right, welcome back to the show. We left off, Brent, last with Captain John Reed with boldly walking with 13 American soldiers into the heart of the Navajo Nation.
Doesn't seem like enough, guys.
Adjust your mic. I can't quite hear you.
Doesn't seem like enough guys.
That's a little bit intense.
Yeah, 13 dudes versus how many did it say there was up there in the hills?
So where we left off, it does appear. It says, as Reed's volunteers pitched camp on the afternoon of October 18, they realized that they were now surrounded by thousands of Navajo. And then to their horror, they discovered that the horses were nowhere to be seen. Horses gone. And then, of course, the Navajo was like, hey, dude, we just let them out to feed and whatever, no big deal. So not only are they encircled, they have no means of escape. They're come on, dude. Even if 30 of them got on a horse and started to just go for it, there's 1,000 Navajos in their backyard. No, it's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it turns out.
Good move.
We'll see how it turns out. So here we go. Getting back into the story where we left off. It looks like Narbona came on down and blah, blah. And his wife surveyed the encampment and said she was confused. There were very few of these Americans present, she said, scarcely more than 25. And I think, doesn't she say, let's kill them? On the other hand, there were several thousand Navajos. The Belagana would be pitifully easy to overpower, she suggested. So where we left off, she basically said, why are you men being such cowards? Why not fall upon these uninvited guests right now and kill every one of them? Such a woman thing to say. I just want to say, women are more vicious than men on certain, look, not necessarily, I mean, they can be highly empathetic and also, but when protecting their own, be absolutely ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it says Narbona and his wife began to argue, and that one imagines that Captain John Reed is just like sitting there staring at it like, oh crap, what's going on? So then our Narbona, angered, told his wife to sit down. What does she know about it? She had not seen Santa Fe. She had not seen their armies, And that's true. Like, these men did come in and, Narbona is quite aware of, hey, these people are not, it's like the mafia. Benny, who, is useless to the mafia, but he's still their family, comes waltzing into the rival place, Well, you don't want to kill him because of the people behind him.
What movies have your kids been watching lately that is making you think of this?
I'm just saying, like, it's just an example. Like, what happens here with Captain John Reed is, look, Narbona is quite aware that if he kills Reed, it's just 30 people, but he has seen Santa Fe, and that he knows the world could come down on him. That there's a lot of might behind these dudes, and he doesn't know their story, why they're here, none of that stuff. So, yeah, go. That's where we left off. Starting today, getting back into the story, it says that after Captain Reed and Narbona had finished their talk, the Dene suddenly seemed in a mood to celebrate. So music goes on, they stash their bows in a cottonwood tree, and then they start dancing away. Other Navajos descended on the Americans' friendly curiosity, eager to inspect the American clothes and goods and to barter for their buckles, buttons, forks, straps, lockets, and books. This is never good. Dude, anytime that happens, it's like we've all seen it. Indians come rolling in. They're like, I want that. I want that. I want that. And there's a little bullying and an underlying tone of, well, if you don't sell it to me, I might just scalp you for it. Like,
yeah, trade is a loose term being used here.
It's like the
coercion is.
It's like that kid in school, the bully. He's like, you pay me and I'll protect you from everybody else. But it's really him you're paying off to not hurt you. The principal chiefs continually exhorted them to come away and not molest us, but we found it impossible to keep the Indians from our encampment. This is Robinson saying this. There was almost a continual trading going on between our men and the Indians, a tin cup for a buckskin, a small piece of tobacco for a butcher knife, etc. The Missouri volunteers eventually traded off most of their clothes so that in due time, Robinson said, we had dressed ourselves pretty nearly in the Indian style. Reed noted that the Navajos were delighted to see our men adopting their costume, and soon the confab took on much pleasurable excitement. The Dene seemed intrigued by anything metal, weapons especially. They were curious to examine our guns, wrote Robinson, and were astonished when shown the properties of a revolver. One of our men wore a watch, which excited great attention. On placing it into their placing it to the ears, they would start from it like a snake.
You hear the ticking?
You know what's wild too is I mean, if they had a kettle, they'd just cut that thing up into arrowheads, like
just smash it to
you can
pieces.
tell there's like a real primitive streak here, but this must have been absolutely fascinating to see metal items. By late afternoon, the Navajo drums began to pound and the pinyon bonfires crackled with the scent of roast mutton hung heavy in the air, and the scent. It seemed that the Missourians and their guests were becoming fast friends. Reed's men were fascinated by the language of the Navajo with its 1,000 finicky inflections and throaty pauses. Through clumsy bouts of translation, they began to get a vague idea of the Dene's sense of humor, their unslackable appetite for teasing and puns, their delight in any incongruous or absurd situation. Everywhere about the camp, the Navajo were lost in traditional amusements, broad jumping, stone throwing, archery contests, and stick dice. It was as though they were throwing a spontaneous open-air festival for the Americans' benefit. Reed's men could see that these spirited people, safe in their own domain, were happy, open, and proud. They were at the height of their power, enjoying the fruits of a particularly successful season of raids. John Hughes described the scene as truly romantic. Contemplate 500 dancers in the hollow recesses of the mountains, with the music of shells and timbrels giving way to the most extravagant joy, and a band of 30 Americans armed with martial accoutrements mingling in the throng. Jacob Robinson felt thoroughly at home and almost forgot that he and his comrades were more than 100 miles inside sketchy territory with their mounts nowhere in sight. See, Jacob and I are not built the same. I would be like so untrusting. Like I've always been this way. I'm waiting. I'm like on the lookout. Dude, I would never be like, oh yeah, we're good now. No, not even. It'd be like constant. I mean, I'd be trying to navigate careful, but this is
my back is always against a tree
these are
or a wall. Right. All exits are clearly located with plans.
I mean, at some point you got to just enjoy it because you're in there. They're in the palm of their hand right now.
At some point now.
But I'd still be like, I wouldn't forget. It didn't matter. They were captivated, smitten almost by their hosts. They abandoned all sense of caution. Nope. They gnawed greasy lamb shanks together. They fondled each other's weapons. They danced and sang. They even swapped clothes.
Now, those last three sentences all sound like euphemisms.
The first American encounter with the Dene had become a love-in.
Yep. There you go. Nailed it.
Later, Robinson looked back on all this naive revelry
with a sort of 15 children he sired that
with
night.
A sort of what were we thinking incredulity. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. It is astonishing, he said, how soon our confidence in each other was almost complete. We were in the midst of a desert surrounded by a nation of powerful savages whose numbers were great and whose friendship was doubtful, who had us completely in their power and who might be treacherous. But we mingled in their dance, and they appeared much pleased at our coming to their country.
I will say this. There is something, no matter what, at the end of the day, they're humans. No matter where they come from. And a lot of things they're doing right here are super human things. Dancing, singing, unity. You
can get a feel for this where people genuinely seem to like you and you like them back and you're like, we're good, man. You know it. But that doesn't mean it can't all change on a dime when brought out of the revelry, you realize you're not my family.
They cut the music and people say police. It's all everyone for themselves, man.
All in all,
no matter what the vibe is, it got cut.
It's over now. Yeah. Okay, it says, all in all, Robinson was deeply impressed with the Navajo as people, finding them the most enlightened tribe of wild Indians. They are of good nature, he wrote, and of fairer complexion than any Indians I have ever seen. That's because they kidnapped a lot of internationals. They got a lot of Mexican, Indian, Indian, a lot of white people, Spanish. They are well provided with wool and skins and may be considered wealthy. Robinson was intrigued by the Dene's woven blankets, which they look upon with pride as a badge of national distinction and superiority. Watching the Navajos fuss over their flocks and woolen goods, Captain Reed struck a comparison to the nomadic shepherds of the Mongolian steppes, an analogy that would crop up frequently in the subsequent accounts by Americans trying to put an old world frame of reference on these unfamiliar people so uniquely tied to their sheep. They are entirely pastoral, Reed said, and in their habits very similar to the Tartars. Above all, the captain observed, the Navajos were excellent horsemen. These lords of the mountains, Reed wrote, may be said to live on horseback. They pay great attention to the breeding of their horses and think scarcely less of them than do the Arabians. It'd be interesting. I don't think the Navajo compared to the Comanche in terms of their Mongolian comparison. In fact, the Comanche may very well be some distant connection there. Like the Comanche didn't look like the rest of the Indians. They had a very, they didn't speak the same languages either. They seem to have, I think the theory there is they actually do descend from like, in language and so forth, from like the Mongolian steppe almost, from the Russian land bridge and stuff like that in a way. Like,
yeah, they don't got the look.
No. Very different.
But blankets, they were talking about those Navajo blankets.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah. Elder Tutchin, the guy that I talked about on my mission, I remember him having a couple blankets, and he gave one to one of his favorite companions. And they're I don't know how you make that by hand.
I don't know. Maybe that's your Googleizer. You should figure that out, you know.
Oh, yeah.
At one point during the afternoon, a rabbit bolted from under the brush, and a group of Navajos on horseback immediately chased them. Scores of other riders joined in, and according to Robinson, the plain was soon covered with these mounted warriors with their feathers streaming in the wind, their arms raised as if for conflict, some riding one way and some another. In the midst of the exciting scenes, they indulged a shout of triumph as they succeeded in capturing their prey. The Missourians must have relished their last night in Navajo country. At great risk, they had tasted an alien culture and completed their mission without incident. It was learned that the American horses were safe and well fed and ready to be saddled up at dawn. They would leave in the morning, and Narbona would even provide them with an escort from the Navajo lands.
They made a loom.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I thought so, but like,
how could you do it otherwise?
Yeah, but how? Because in my mind, a loom is like a really hardcore, solid structure. Their looms are not designed like that. They're way more freestyle. This is a loom that's like you have to have 3 children to say, hold this to operate. Like, there's no way this is just a one-person operation, that loom.
It says that they would leave in the morning, and Narbona would provide them with an escort from the Navajo lands. Through their dumb luck and blundering good nature,
absolutely,
Reed's volunteers had succeeded in not getting themselves killed.
We all know that person who gets through, by the grace of God.
Yeah.
You know that person. You're just like, you were alive because you were kind and sweet, and there's no guile in you. And somehow that has been your saving grace.
These young farm boys seem to believe they could do anything, go anywhere, and not get hurt. The ancient cycles of violence did not quite pertain to them.
Well, I mean, they've got kind of some proof, don't they?
Yeah.
Don't you hate that?
All right. Next chapter, The Devil's Turnpike. That doesn't sound so...
That sounds like a skateboarding movie intro. Na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
With Kit
Devil's Turnpike.
You play too many video games. With Kit Carson now guiding them, General Kearny's 100 dragoons rose from the Rio Grande on October 17, 1846, and worked their way west until they struck the Gila River, and then followed its tortuous canyons through land that was increasingly barren and bleached. As October melted into November, they passed from the realm of the Apache into territory of unknown tribes, the Wolf Eaters, the Dirty Fellows, the Club Indians, the Pine Forest Dwellers, the Tremblers, the Albinos, the Fools. Such were the informal names gleaned from Spanish interpreters and hastily copied down in official American journals. These remote tribes had never seen Americans, had seldom seen Spaniards, and many were obviously terrified by these strange new warriors boring into their midst. The Tremblers had acquired the name, according to Lieutenant William Emery, from their emotions at meeting the whites. Their shaky chief spoke in a tongue resembling more the bark of a mastiff than the words of a human being. Carson and Kearney rode together much of the way, the scout in his greasy buckskins, the general in his proud dragoon blues. Fellow Missourians, they shared many friends back home. With laconic good humor, Carson tried to make conversation as they went along, but much of the time he quietly sulked. It wasn't the hard monotony of having to cover in reverse the same sun-scorched terrain he had so recently crossed, nor was it simply that he missed Josefa, nor the nagging distaste he still felt for surrendering to Fitzpatrick the messages that Fremont had formerly entrusted to him. He had let go of all those concerns back on the Rio Grande. Mainly, Carson's stewing had to do with the transcontinental adventure he'd been denied. In all his wide travels, he had never been to the East Coast. Carson had been looking forward to seeing his nation's capital. He was under no illusions that he belonged to the closed world of books and stylish clothes and drawing room manners. He didn't think he belonged there. Yet he wanted to meet the well-placed men and women who had effectively served as his sponsors, sending him on the errands that had made him nationally famous, writing about him, broadcasting his exploits, not only President Polk, but also Senator Thomas Hart Benton. And the senator's daughter, Jessie Benton Fremont, Fremont's wife, as well as the Secretary of State, Buchanan. He wanted to meet all these people. Carson, who had in effect been field agent of Manifest Destiny, wanted to meet its prime movers. The competitor in Carson had also been intrigued by the notion of making a 60-day trip to cross the continent in 2 months' time, which it's like an athletic holy grail. Like he wanted to beat that. 60 days was what he had promised Fremont he could do, coast to coast in 60 days. The feat he had proposed hung in the air as a mythic goal of doubtful attainability. In 1846, the quickest way to get information or goods from one coast to the other was by ship via the antipodal tip of Terra del Fuego, or alternatively to Panama, then overland to another ship waiting on the far shores of the isthmus.
Del Fuego.
It's crazy, like before they dug the Panama Canal, that they still like would park there, run across and get on another boat and go around and save like so much time. Carson was interested in blazing the continental overland route, thereby proving its merits. He had been right on schedule by his estimation, and Carson's party had spent 26 days getting to. Yeah, he was on the way. He was like gonna do it, and then he got derailed. Mm-hmm. Now here he was, ingloriously loping along a slow trail with a middle-aged general who'd pointed him toward a land that had already been conquered, and Carson did not like it one bit. In fact, Carson's now dated information was all wrong. California was not conquered, bro. It wasn't conquered. Since he had left Los Angeles with Fremont's triumphant dispatches, the territory had been convulsed by an insurrection.
Yeah. An insurrection of what?
Oh, brother, things have gone downhill. Fremont is kind of a dipshit, but also flamboyantly bold. And we're about to see more of his audaciousness. This is a sort of fake it till you make it fellow.
He sounds like a politician. Like you just described a politician.
More than a politician, though. Like more of a. Remember when we read River of Doubt, right? And you had the one like you have these explorers going, we'll do this, and then they all die in like the first month. You know, it's like. It's one of those guys, kind of. But he has Carson. So
Mr. Manifest Destiny.
Mr. Magic, always bailing out the audacious nut job. Carson and Fremont together are what made the West happen, part of what made the West happen the way it did. You know what's funny, though? When I first read this, I had no idea how we got California and how we got New Mexico and how we got Oregon. And I had no idea.
Other people had
I just
it first?
took it for like anybody had it first.
Oh yeah, you're thinking it's just Indians. No, there's political beings, organizations, other countries.
This was all kind of like what? And in some ways, honestly, you can't help but we're going to get deeper into the story, but you can't help but feel like fortune favored the bold. That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And
you got to march out there with your gunter chain, mark off your land, say no, Tom, this is mine.
Yep. So the Americans had been kicked out of Los Angeles, out of Santa Barbara, out of every other coastal settlement south of Monterey. The Mexicans, outraged by the harsh terms clamped on them by Commodore Robert Stockton, including curfews and arbitrary arrests without a hearing, had risen up and attacked American positions. In the words of one historian, the revolt had, quote, blossomed like a crown fire leaping through mountain timber.
A crown fire?
Blossomed like a crown fire leaping through mountain timber. Yeah, like the crown of the forest, like the top of the trees.
Gotcha. That makes more sense now.
That's how I'm interpreting it. I just might have made some stuff up.
Oh, darn. It's never been done on the internet before.
A manifesto had been circulated among the citizens. This is a quote, "We all, the inhabitants of the Department of California, as members of the great Mexican nation," declare that it is and has been our wish to belong to her alone. Therefore, the intrusive authorities appointed by the invading forces of the United States
skipping some pictures there, bro,
are held as null and void. All North Americans being foes of Mexico, we swear not to lay down our arms until we see them ejected from Mexican soil. Now, the reversal was nearly complete, and the proud Californians again had the upper hand. When they say Californians, they mean the Mexican version. The only place the Americans still held was San Diego, where Commodore Stockton had a few warships anchored in the bay. But the Mexicans there had him so thoroughly pinned down that he could scarcely come ashore. General Kearney, with his confident guide and his miserably small and haggard force, was limping toward a trap. In early November, Kearney's dragoons reached a world cracked and drawn into blisters and uninhabited by man, a world whose only denizens appeared to be tarantulas, scorpions, and skittering lizards. The ground was spongy, with saline moisture, and wherever the soldiers' feet pressed the ground, the salts of the earth effloresced and gave it the appearance of being covered with frost. In this way, the numberless, this was written by Emery. These are often quotes. This flowery nonsense, that's from the time.
Yeah, that's a Tolkien thing, dude. You can cut out about a third out of The Hobbit and it would still be great.
In this way, the numberless tracks of horses were, this book ain't nothing. You want to know about a book that's just over the top. Read Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper.
Yeah, I proposed that to Brian. He has not shot an idea down fast.
Watch.
Brian was like, no.
Look, Daniel Day-Lewis as Hawkeye in the movie.
Yeah.
Epic. But man, the book was a drudgery. Dude. I mean, I got through it and it was good, but it was just it's extra. So pedantic. It's got it's controversial. Just get on there and ask ChatGPT. They'll tell you. It's very at the time it was popular, super popular. That type of writing was popular, a romance novel, overdone.
I get you.
And later people were like, why are we calling this a classic? It's sort of trashy.
Well,
anyway,
your ancestors were a little trashy.
Classic, though. It still is. In this way, the numberless tracks of horses were indelible and could be traced for great distances. Okay, let's see here. So they arrive, basically, and they see this place. Captain Henry Turner said, marching over his desert landscape, it was a strange existence. I constantly felt as though I were in a dream, to be thus surrounded day after day with the wilderness, not one familiar object in nature except the sun, the moon, and the stars. 'Twere better for it to be blotted out from the face of the earth. It is the veriest wilderness in the world. Veriest. And then he said, and then the sad thought comes over me that I am far away from my little family and that each day widens the distance. A little melancholy. Kearney was perhaps less charitable. He says this is what he says about the desert. It surprised me to see so much land that can never be of any use to man or beast.
That's a man with no sight right there.
You know what? Years ago, I went to Death Valley I was in college, and it was, I don't know, my second year in school, and I was in a geology and ecology class, and we traveled to Death Valley, and we did There was like 30 students, and we just spent like 3 weeks there and camping and stuff. And each person in the class presented like essays on certain subjects and so on. Well, every day there was some place to go. What fascinated me was how full of life the desert was. It just was dead silent and seemed like there wasn't life there, but it was everywhere.
They have hot springs with fish in them.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Like
that's crazy.
It's something like if you take those fish out and put them in another like different pond or something, within like one generation or something, they are no longer, they have like transformed into a different kind of fish.
Something to do. You put them.
I mean, I could be talking to my butt right now, but I'm pretty sure.
I was about to say the same thing.
But it's a wild place. No, it's for real. Desert, Death Valley. It's a incredible place, and you realize the more time you spend outside that every environment has life. And it's adapted to it on this planet. It's just difficult maybe for
it's really hard to see it in the desert. That's what I was going to say.
Remember when we read,
you flip a rock over and all of a sudden though,
remember when we read River of Doubt? It sounded like the jungle sounds like hell to me. Everything's trying to eat you. And when you're walking around and people, they starve to death in the jungle. There's food and animals everywhere, but it's all so camouflaged. And anything that does die is like consumed in moments that it's so eerie place.
Yeah.
But in the
Nothing
same way,
decomposes.
In the same way, the desert just seems to have life in it, teeming, but you can't see it. Someone like that is so used to different environments, I think they see a desert like that and they just see an uninhabitable place, I mean, same thing when people go to the Arctic and so on. So it's not surprising he has that attitude. But it says, and yet by Kearny's tendriling movement across it, the useless land was now effectively part of the United States. The 100 men now grunting across the desert did not look like much of an invading force, but that's what they were. A long, slender offshoot of Washington. Kearny's orders from President Polk gave him wide discretionary power to take possession of all of what was then called Upper California, an unbelievably vast area that included not only the present state of California, but also parts of Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. Seldom in history had so much real estate been seized by the simple act of a few men walking over it. That's what I'm saying. Even as Kearny claimed this seer land, he clearly doubted whether it was worth taking. Although the Spanish had long ago settled large swaths of the lush California coast, they had never been able to make anything of this infernal country in the interior. Spanish explorers crisscrossed it many times, and several crude trails have been stamped out into to carry on trade between places, but most of it remained a vague suppositional country, like an in-between. There were no villages, no missions, or no nothing. And even the nomadic Indians passed through it sparingly. It's a pretty serious desert.
Some dead spots.
Blazing by day and freezing at night, the desert march was brutal on Kearny's 100 dragoons and lethal to their horses and mules. Animals were collapsing almost hourly. In a single day, a dozen dropped in their tracks, and the stronger ones were becoming patchy with scabs and saddle sores. Much of the time, the animals had only the pods and branches of mesquite shrubs to eat for hundreds of miles. The men walked on foot to save the animals. Man and beast alike were slashed and cut, prickly pears and barrel cactuses everywhere. Increasingly, Kearny spotted the now thoroughly decomposed carcasses of mules that Carson had abandoned on his way east. Eventually, Kearny's own magnificent bay, the beloved horse that had been with him ever since Fort Leavenworth, expired. And so even the general, prim equestrian though he was, had to suffer the indignity of mounting a mule.
Sucks about the horse, but
I mean, mules are so tough. They're actually pretty cool little hybrid critters. So this terrain was just as Carson had warned Kearny it would be. Back on the Rio Grande, Carson had said that every part that had been ever ventured into the Gila had emerged from its stark canyons in an advanced state of starvation. So they knew what they were getting into. The general had taken his scout's advice. He'd sent the wagons back to Santa Fe because he basically said, don't bring these wagons, don't bring anything, it won't make it, He was grateful not to be pulling anything other than the 2 rolling howitzers. So they still brought their big guns, but everything else they left.
Gotta drag those big old guns around. Could be a pain in the butt.
There was one particularly grueling stretch that Kearney's men came to call the Devil's Turnpike, a succession of steep ascents and basalt precipices that alone claimed 15 mules.
Jeez.
Lieutenant
That's the best
Emery,
route they got.
Lieutenant Emery described the Stygian Pass with grim eloquence. The metallic clinks of spurs, the rattling of the mule shoes, the high black peaks, the deep dark ravines, and the unearthly looking cacti which stuck out from the rocks like the ears of Mephistopheles, all favored the idea that we were now treading on the verge of the regions below. Occasionally, a mule gave up the ghost and was left as a propitiatory tribute to the place. It just kind of reminds me of, I went to Cassiar Mountains of British Columbia, way north, and I was on a moose hunt there. And I think there was somewhere around 50 horses or something in camp. Those horses have to be rode in early spring, or like as soon as the snow melts, by some wranglers, outfitters, couple, 2-3 people. They bring this mass herd of horses in, and there's trails, and they navigate them. And that time of year, it's dry enough. It's summertime, and the trail is fairly okay at that time. And they bring these horses in, and then they use them all, summer, fall, and then they got to ride them out at the end of the season. And you got to get them out before the storm comes, and everything dies back there. I mean, it's nasty. And our crew, I was part of the ride out, and we had to bring these like 50, 70, I don't remember how many horses it was, a lot of horses, truckloads of horses. And I want to say there was probably, I don't know how many of us, 20 people, 30 people on horses, like riding out, and some are just like packed animals, just loaded up, packing supplies out. Long horse train. The country was nasty, and the snow had come, melted snow, and it was like there was bogs and swamps. There was areas that were straight down, and think about it, after 20 horses went down, and then 22, and it just turned into this mud slide. The land was just degrading right under these animals, and man, it was so sketchy. And my horse slid and just went like 100 feet down that hill, like hauling ass. And I fell down, hit my head on a rock, and I was a little dazed and concussed, and got back up. And it was like harrowing stuff like that. And there's a couple times where they almost just shot the horse or the mule and left it there because they couldn't get it out of a bog. It was so deep. Thankfully, we were able to get them all out. And I remember getting back and thinking that was one of the most dangerous, like sketchy multi-day rides I had ever been on. I mean, it was nasty. The outfitter was kind of new to the area, and he hadn't tried to leave that late. And he had pushed it because he wanted to get more hunts in,
Yep.
And
pushed a little too hard though.
But he actually improved the trail quite a bit to where it was earlier in the year, so he could maybe stretch that moment. Prior to the trail improvement, the old outfitter who used to own it and ran it for 30 years, I believe they said on average, because these animals have been back there a long time, they've lost weight, they've gotten skinnier and skinnier, they're a little weak, and now they got to make this ride out. On average, I think they said four animals died every year when they left, but by the time they got back to the...
Dang.
Like, it's just a process of...
What's really crazy to me, Brian, in all of this is that human beings still can't produce things that a lot of animals can do naturally for us better, like horses. Like what kind of vehicle could you have up there that could perform the way that a string of horses could?
Well, I mean, you got to have fuel. There's a limitation there. It's hundreds of 200-300 miles of bush you have to go through. And when you're hunting, you want to hunt on them. I mean, short of flight, which is not legal. It's not very sporting to fly around in a chopper and shoot moose.
Yeah.
I mean, you're back there to experience the wilds. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that some sort of, I mean, even if you had access to some kind of excavator, giant tank, and you were like going to carve a road in there, it's not like that. It's cliffed and it's drops. I mean, you need dynamite, and you this is like serious country that you can't just cut a trail in. Okay. So a motorcycle, sure. But even that wouldn't get through half of it, and you'd run out of fuel. I mean, there's the horse is pretty much, and the mule is pretty much the gold standard.
Yeah, it's king still.
And if you want to go strike out after a moose or a caribou or something, you never know where they are. A horse can just step over these 10-foot willow patches and just go over them. When we were on foot, I mean, it would take me hours to go to what a horse can just do in like minutes to traverse.
You have to jump over them,
and
practically.
you can't see anything unless you're on the horses, you know?
Yeah, you could have something real nasty and mean.
Oh, and they were everywhere.
Away.
The grizz was everywhere, and they were giant.
And being on a nice tall horse make you look nice and scary.
But seeing animal, I could see how just on a pack train, you know, army moving like this, death of livestock is just
par for the course.
It's just gonna happen all the time. And having seen it, it's wild. You know, so they're freezing at night because it's the desert, right? And they see what's left of like Carson's crew when they went through. And then he says that you know, they're pulling the howitzers. The general had taken. It says that the dragoons had begun to grumble about their hardships, and Captain Turner complained in his journal, quote, "How little do those who sit in their easy chairs in Washington know of the privations we are daily subjected to. Even our anxious friends at home can form no idea of the trials we undergo, wading streams, clambering over rocks, laboring through the valleys where the sand causes our animals to sink up to their knees, then our frugal meals, hard bed, and perhaps wet blankets. I have no taste for this mode of life. It contains not a single charm for me. It is labor from morning till night. I'm tired of this business. I wish it was over. This is a soldier's fare, but I am sick of it." That right there, I mean, I hate to say it, and I'm not there. Captain Turner complaining at his journal. By the way, that does you no good. It's pointless. I'm not wired that way. I bet you Kearney doesn't bitch at all. Doesn't write a thing in his journal about how hard it is. No. Some dude will die and he'll kill 3 animals that day, and he'll be like, "We got where we're going."
Yeah. So there's this thing called the pendulum, and Kearney's swinging one foot. We want to get somewhere right there, nice in the middle, Bri.
All I'm saying is I've been on grueling hunts and stuff, and I've been around people who focus on how hard it is and how much it sucks and how much work, and they build up this long list of things that suck, and they nurture that list day after day. What's the point? You're there, you're in it. Enjoy the work. It's just works. Like, change how you see it, and it changes everything. But many just don't have the will, that strength.
Here's
to do
the problem:
it's weakness. I just see it as weakness. I just say you're a bitch. That's what I just read. I don't. And having grinded all these years in the mountains and done tough stuff, you just don't even dwell on these things. You just do it. And at the end of the day, I mean, I see no practical use in this. Now, in reflection, back in Washington, talking about what it was like, and you know, bringing that attention to the masses and telling a story about like it, and inspiring others. Yeah. But in the moment, complaining about it all, saying how bad it sucks and how unfair it is and how it's not for you, and shut up.
That person is the one who's just adding shit to the fire.
Yeah.
You're doing something that already sucks. We already know that it sucks. You don't have to say that it sucks. It just makes it suck even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have monobrow, you don't got to come along and tell me I got a monobrow. Bring attention.
The thing is I'll be out with like Ben or Livesey or Lampers or Hunt. They never one time, like, it might be cold and miserable and you might be half frozen. None of us will utter a word about the misery we're in. Pretty much. We might say something that's macabre or you know, some dark humor about it. But none of us are going to spread the toxin of negative thoughts to the group. None of us. And it's so great when you're with people that know it's horrible and they just put a smile on their face and pretend it's all just great fun. And at the end of the day, I think you grow over time, hardened in your mind and tough and resilient about these things. And you begin to not be fazed by physical discomfort. You know, I look at Cameron Haynes and running like as much as he does, or Goggins and some of these guys. They are highly skilled at discomfort, this weathering pain and discomfort. Like it's now, it has no hold on them. And then in that way, they're able to accomplish things that most men could only dream of. It has to bleed over into other parts of your life too. it's like a school that trains you to be successful in other walks of life. If you can endure these things, then when this thing hits you over here, it's like, yeah, it's like training. Anyway, back to the book. It says, there was some stuff going on back home. It says finally, after traversing this trail, it says, out of the black jaws of the Gila, Kearney's column emerged to behold a splendid oasis. They had entered the well-watered land of the peaceful Pimas and a related tribe called the Maricopas. The Pimas were advanced farmers who had long ago mastered a complex system of dikes and irrigation canals that allowed them to grow abundant corn, beans, squash, tobacco, cotton, and among other things. And Lieutenant Emery's engineering mind was impressed by the beauty, order, and disposition of the canals, and was, like most of Kearney's men, thoroughly taken with the whole tribe. They were frank, confident, peaceful, and industrious, and in possession of a beautiful and fertile basin. Kearney's men, famished as they were, approached the Pimas and offered money and bartered for food, but the Indians refused any sort of payment. Bread is to eat, not to sell. Take what you want, they insisted in Spanish, and promptly invited Kearney's men to a feast. After they'd had their fill, the dragoons and the Pimas smoked and laughed and traded far into the night. Though they could communicate only through grunts and sign language, the Americans were delighted with their gracious hosts, and Henry Turner found the Pimas a good, harmless people, and more industrious than I have ever found in any Indians. They have kind, amiable expressions. Never did I look upon a more benevolent face than I did that of the old chief. Emery concurred. It was a rare sight to be thrown in the midst of a large nation of what is often termed wild Indians, who surpass many of the Christian nations in agriculture, are little behind them in the useful arts, and are immeasurably before them in honesty and virtue.
Peaceful Pimas is a great band name.
The Pimas were especially captivated by Lieutenant Emery and his array of surveying tools. They were into his telescopes, sextants, barometers, and crimped metal tubes and glass bowls of mercury. In the evening, Emery was eager to observe what he called two occultations of Jupiter's satellites. This is an interesting group of people. He showed them his tech, and they were like, whoa, looking through, scopes and stuff. Yeah. But it does sound like, what's crazy about the Pimas and some of these groups, it's like, how did they just not get murdered by like other Indian groups? And it does seem that they would have like a little oasis surrounded by hundreds of miles of desert.
Mm-hmm.
And so they basically had a forbidding landscape as sort of their wall of protection.
Their desert was the moat.
Mm-hmm. And allowed them to develop a thriving little civilization that was able to indulge in, technology.
Some agriculture,
more advanced art and living. Like, these things tend to happen the less savage a country has to be out of survival. It's like once you had agriculture and you didn't have to hunt and fish all the time and fight off.
You're not constantly make it so your neighbor Steve can't come over and knock over your front door and you stake all your stuff, you know.
Then when you can spend a little more time and, kind of experimenting higher things and learning, people tend to advance a civilization. But it says they kept going, and it was November 23rd. And then it looks like Lieutenant Emery made a disturbing discovery. He was out surveying with his staff out in the hills there, or far from the camp, and he encountered a lone Mexican riding a horse. Lone Mexican, Brent.
Is that like a...
Where are you going? He asked through an interpreter. I am hunting horses, the Mexican answered nervously. As he passed by, Emery grew suspicious. The lieutenant noticed that the Mexican rider had packed many bottles of water and other supplies. He appeared to be embarked on a long journey. Why don't you follow me to camp? Emery asked him. The Mexican demurred. I will come in a moment. First, there is something I must do, and as he said this, he tried to slip away. Emery's suspicions only intensified. As he later put it, the Mexican's anxiety increased by my determination not to comply with his request, so Emery and his staff effectively arrested the man and led him into Kearney's camp. There, Kearney had him searched and found on his person a satchel full of mail, all of it in Spanish. Interpreters were summoned and immediately set about translating the letters. The writer, it was soon ascertained, was an official courier carrying dispatches from California to General Jose Castro, stationed in Sonora. The deeper the translators dug into these letters, the more troubling was their import. It seemed that there had been a counter-revolution in California. They all spoke exultingly of having thrown off the detestable Anglo-Yankee yoke, Emery wrote, and they congratulated themselves that the tricolor once more floated in California. Further questioning of the courier proved fruitless, for he played his part so dexterously, according to Emery, that it was not in our power to extract the truth from him. What?
He just played dumb that good? Or like he just...
Apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, you think you could do better?
Well...
I bet Carson could. The letters were several weeks old and likely swollen with braggadocio, but the uniformity of the reports made it clear that the Americans had indeed been kicked out of coastal California. Kearny now understood the full peril of his predicament. He had only 100 men and his mounts were in deplorable condition. He cursed his earlier decision to send back 2/3 of his dragoons to Santa Fe. His tiny force was hardly in shape to fight, but at this point, the only recourse was to press on as fast as they could to confront the enemy. It was either fight there or wither here in the desert. Carson's reaction to the reversal in California was conflicted. He must have been shocked and surprised to learn that the dispatches had been carrying were so full of error. They were. We conquered California. It's ours now. Just kidding. JK. Jokes. At the same time, he was concerned for his American friends in California, especially Fremont, and wondered how they were faring. California was back on a war footing, and history would be happening there again. At the very least, it would not be dull. And Carson knew Southern California. He spoke Spanish. He was already well acquainted with Stockton and the principal players. Now he understood that his services were truly needed. At last, he was fully engaged in Kearny's effort and was very happy to be returning to California. On November 25, Kearny's force forded the Colorado River and plodded westward. It said that all the men were kind of actually excited. They appeared that they would get their wish to have a fight. You just can't take the war out of soldiers. But they still had several hundred miles of wasteland to cross. The desert country would not let up. They ate the last of their rations. Wolves appeared at their flanks. The mules kept on dropping.
What'd they do to the Mexican? Gonna gloss over that?
I'm sure they let him go.
Sure, yeah. What's your letter? Here you go, bud. On your way.
I mean, he's prisoner of war. You know, he didn't do anything like worth, execution. Maybe.
I don't know. What is it with couriers and like? Is that the same thing as he's not a spy?
Well, there's no Geneva Convention. Just
I guess that's true.
By now, the dragoons looked like wretches. They are sorry-looking set, he wrote in his journal, Johnson. In the dusty Chaparral country, some 50 miles from San Diego, Kearny encountered an Englishman named Edward Stokes, who had lived and ranched in California for years. Though he was a neutral, Stokes agreed to take a message to Robert Stockton in San Diego. It says, he wrote, "We left Santa Fe on the 25th September, having taken possession of New Mexico and annexed it to the United States." That's what he wrote. Kearny's letter is notable for its stoic understatement. He never mentions the fact that he and his men are starving and his few remaining mules are in terrible condition. But why would you? Like, if it got intercepted, you wouldn't want the enemy to know anything like that.
Again, we're looking for that nice middle ground. Not too much, maybe a little bit more in this, maybe get a little more details.
He asked for someone to meet him so they can know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
3 days later, on the morning of December 5, about 25 miles east of San Diego, Kearny's men were amazed to spot an American flag fluttering in the distance over a dust cloud kicked up by approaching force of United States Marines.
Nice.
The Englishman Stokes had succeeded in getting through to Stockton. So the guy, the guy that lived there, the farmer, he got the note in to him, and it says that 39 Marines under the command of the intrepid Captain Archibald Gillespie. What a great name, Archibald Gillespie. Name. He and his epic courier mission to meet Fremont in California had slipped through the Mexican siege lines, ringing San Diego, and sped to Kearny's aid. This same guy. It says, of course, Kearny would have preferred to have more than 39 men, but he was in no position to complain. Besides, these Marines had a few relatively fresh mounts and a small brass 4-pound howitzer, not to mention food. The Dragoons and the Marines embraced one another, fellow countrymen united on the far side of the continent. Kearny's spirits lifted. Captain Gillespie greeted the general and confirmed everything that he had gleaned from the Mexican fellow in the papers. They had indeed been expelled from nearly every coastal town in California, except San Diego. Gillespie also informed Kearny that a force of a few hundred well-mounted Californians was camping nearby at a little Indian village called San Pasqual. They were led by a Captain Andre Pico, a high-ranking leader of the counter-revolution and brother of the former governor of California. Gillespie suggested that if Kearny thought it advisable, they should quickly mount a surprise attack against the Mexicans and beat up their camp. Kearny liked the sound of this bold venture. Although taking such risks seemed contrary to his circumspect nature, he thought it far better to shock Captain Pico with an overwhelming pre-dawn strike than to dally and let them learn the truth that they're half dead and Gillespie's and reinforcements weren't much. They were puny, weak, and appallingly mounted. Kearny understood the classic bluff of plains warfare: to disguise weakness in concentrated action, to descend on the enemy and convince him through decisive fury that you're more powerful than you really are. Emery described Kearny's thinking. The general decided we must be the aggressive party, that he would attack at night and beat them before it was light enough to discover our force. All right. Carson liked the idea. Based on his previous experience in California, he did not think much of the Mexicans as fighters. They were individually brave, he thought, but poorly organized and seldom well equipped. He suggested all you have to do is yell, make a rush, and the Californians will run away. Captain Gillespie was similarly disdainful of Mexican military prowess, even though Mexican insurrections had soundly expelled him and his fellow Marines from Los Angeles a month before. Gillespie once declared in a report, Californians of Spanish blood have a holy horror of the American rifle. That's tough talk, Gillespie.
That is.
Tough talk. It's possible that Kearny, having slogged nearly 2,000 miles from Fort Leavenworth, is one of the longest marches in American military history, was simply spoiling for a fight. Some historians have certainly leveled this charge at him. Stanley Vestal, for one, argued that Kearny was motivated by a thirst for the glory he imagined his peers were racking up in greater battles deeper in Mexico. All the other generals had been shooting down Mexicans by the hundreds, Vestal wrote, and he had done nothing but march and read proclamations. And he had to deal with Fremont in charge. Kearny's rock-solid record on the plains and everything that is known about the equanimity of his personality would seem to discount such an assessment. If he was making an error of judgment, it was not likely for reasons of professional jealousy or perhaps personal glory. Besides, there were sound strategic aspects to the contemplated attack. Kearny's main objective here was to seize control of Pico's pastured horses while the Californians were asleep. If he could do that, he realized the battle would be over before it began. He was a cavalryman, and he was mortified by how sick and weak the horses were. He felt like this was his chance. Carson understood the purpose of the proposed raid perfectly, and he described it with his usual, our objective was to get the Californians animals. Basically, they want to steal their horses so they can fight better, because their horses are all half dead. How do you think this is going to go?
Them stealing the horses?
This whole surprise battle. Does it sound like it's working out? Do you think it's going to work out? Just curious what you think.
They've got some big guns. If they get the big guns in place and something, maybe they might be able to scare them, but I feel like they're underestimating them maybe a little bit.
Well, it was a rainy night, covered in fog, and as most of the men shivered in their heavy wet blankets, Kearny decided to send a small detachment over to Pico's encampment and assess the situation under the cover of darkness. A reconnaissance party was hastily arranged, composed of 6 dragoons and a Mexican quisling named Rafael Mercado, who had deserted from the California fort. Around 10 o'clock, this motley team of spies took off on mules into the mist. Soon they arrived outside the camp, and the dragoons sent Mercado forward on foot to coax an Indian to come out and provide details about Pico's force. How big was it? Where were the men sleeping? Where were the horses pastured? Mercado crept into the village and, sure to plan, found an Indian who was willing to talk to the Americans. But the dragoons thought that Mikado was taking too long to accomplish his task. They heard a dog barking, and in their worried impatience, they raced toward the village to get a better look. When they did, the jangle of their swords against their saddles alarmed Pico's night watchmen. The sentries cried out, and the dragoons, having found Mikado, spurred away in the fog. But in the confusion of their flight, someone dropped a blue jacket that was stamped U.S. A Mexican sentinel found the garment and brought it to Pico, who promptly called his men to horses. Soon all the Mexicans were aroused from their sleep. They dashed from the mud huts of the village and ran to their mounts, yelling, "Viva California! Abajo los Americanos!" The American reconnoiter had backfired. In a blundered instant, the element of surprise was lost.
Whose jacket was it that they dropped?
Why didn't they just send one dude like Carson?
And why are they running around with swords on like a stealth mission?
Us backseat drivers. We could do this way better. Sometime after midnight, they got back to camp. They told him of the debacle. The general wasted no time. He ordered an immediate attack. If the advantage of surprise had been forfeited, he still had the advantage of darkness. Pico had no idea what kind of army he was dealing with. And he needed to get to him before they figured it out. The American camp erupted in wild shouts. It was so cold and damp that the bugler could not get off a note of revel. The wet blankets were crusty with frost, the men groggy and cold, but once they realized the situation, they sprang to life. As one understated diarist put it, there was a good deal of excitement and desire for a brush with the enemy. Within 15 minutes, the dragoons were all on their mules and trotting towards San Pasqual. Soon they united with Gillespie and the Marines, and together the two parties marched to war. The bugler had sufficiently warmed his lips to blast a few notes of a battle song called Charge as foragers. A forage was an antiquated term for a raid. When they reached the brow of a hill overlooking the now stirring hamlet of San Pasqual, Kearny stopped in the scrub and addressed his men. Their country expected much of them. He wanted them to encircle the village and seize the horses. If they had to kill the enemy, they should do it, but he wanted to capture as many Californians alive as possible. It was not to be a slaughter. The fight, he suggested, would probably be close in. Their carbines would not be worth much in the misty darkness, so they should have their swords at the ready. Remember, Kearny said, one point of the saber is far more effective than any number of thrusts. And then, in the early hours of December 6, 1846, his 100 dragoons turned their animals toward San Pasqual, which lay a mile off across the low brush country. Soon they were stretched in a long, jumbled column, two abreast. Carson started out near the vanguard with Kearny and Emery, the three men, working their way down the steep hill in the filtered gray light of the pre-dawn. Dun, dun, dun!
Dude, fighting with swords and guns is so weird. We got this firearm, but pull out your swords and poke them. You know? Like,
Brent, when you have a gun that only shoots like a couple of bullets, you know, and then you're like out, and other people have big swords, you better learn how to use a sword. I mean,
I get it. It's what
there's a lot of hand-to-hand stuff going on back in the day, bro.
Oh, yeah, dude. One of my favorite times in history is nights when we had firearms. People running around a full plate mail with like shotguns and blunderbusses. That's a great time in history.
I mean, it's gonna get bad here moving forward. Yeah. You'll have to find out how it unfolds.
Tune in next time.
Yeah, folks. Thanks for tuning in. That's it for today's show. We'll catch you on the next episode. All right, folks. I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your grandpa.
Hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.